However, last Sunday, I was a pulpit guest at the UU Church in Durango. And when I was there, I actually greeted them all on behalf of everyone at First Unitarian. I gave them a blessing of peace and grace. So I want to return that and say grace and peace to you from everyone at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Durango. My wife, Ulrika, and son, Miles, they were able to make the trip to Durango with me. And from my position at the front of the church, I could see that Ulrika got up periodically during the service. So after the service, I asked her how Miles did during the church service. And she said he was very cranky and fidgety. That is, until you started talking, then he just fell asleep. I hope I do not have that effect on you today. In fact, my first commandment of preaching is, thou shalt not bore. A ministerial mentor of mine a number of years ago told me his entire spiritual odyssey. And one of the highlights for him was the birth of his firstborn son. And let me tell you, I was there for Miles' birth. I saw the pain, the rawness, the beauty. And I can't not say that it was the most beautiful day of my life. But it was a very spiritual moment. I've actually found the more ordinary moments with Miles to be as spiritual and sacred as his birth. Him smiling at me falling asleep with him in my arms. For so long, I have thought kids, having children, would impede my happiness, but I've realized having children is happiness. So being a father, I'm thinking a lot about what I want for him. And essentially, I want the same thing for him as I want for all the children and youth here at this church, and actually for all of you. I want you, and I want Miles, to take an inner quest, console with your higher self, be connected in some way to the universe, perform acts of service, develop a spiritual practice that makes your life whole, ponder the big questions. These, I think, are the roads that lead to happiness and a fulfilled life. And I highly recommend a book I just recently read called The Spiritual Child, The New Science on Parenting for Health and Lifelong Thriving by psychologist Lisa Miller. Her research shows that youth that developed and cultivated the kind of spiritual life I'm talking about are less likely to engage in risky behavior. Here it's up there. They're less likely to abuse drugs, and they're less likely to get depressed. So, with these two slides, I'm getting dangerously close to violating my second and third commandments of preaching. Thou shalt not give a book report, and thou shalt not give statistics. And those are very closely linked to the first commandment, thou shalt not bore. But I think these statistics that I said are really powerful, and that is why I mention them here. I always knew that there were benefits to the religious life, and I knew that the spiritual life made me a better person and made me happier, but I did not know that you could quantify such things. Those statistics prove our spiritual lives do indeed matter. And how we nourish the next generation will and does matter. In some cases, it's a matter of life and death. So how do we nourish our children spiritually? The question, I think, is not just for parents, but for grandparents, godparents, aunts, uncles, mentors, teachers, ministers, and all of us here at First Unitarian who take some responsibility in raising our children and youth in our faith. So let's go back to the reading from the parents' Tao Te Ching. Do not try to teach religion to your children. That's a hard teaching in and of itself. Aren't we supposed to be teaching religion? Across the courtyard there we have a whole building committed to doing just that. However, religion as a set of rules or as principles is not what I want to pass on to children. Instead, we should be nourishing a natural spirituality, a quality of experience that is native in all of us. It's not some supernatural realm outside of our ordinary lives. According to Lisa Miller, starting as early as the ages of 4 and 5, children have these moments of transcendent experience. Now, I don't know how old I was, probably around 8 years old. I remember going to a Christmas Eve service at the Lutheran church I grew up in. We had a ritual of singing Silent Night in the dark, the only night lights being the one star high above the altar, the Advent wreath candles, and of course the light coming from the organist's lamp. A simple, beautiful ritual that everyone, young and old, look forward to. We sang the hymn in German, Stille Nacht. Wow, that experience still sticks with me to this day. It is forever ingrained in my memory. And I consider myself a religious naturalist, that the earth, that all the natural processes of life provide me with plenty of awe and reverence and a sense of worship. I believe we've evolved to be religious, and spiritual experiences are real and meaningful pursuits. Being religious and or spiritual is a natural longing we universally have in some shape or form. So natural spirituality is located in the interior. It is sort of mysterious, and, well, psychologist Abraham Maslow might have called it a peak experience. Maslow concluded that the most creative people are fueled by these types of experiences. So our religious community should be in the business of making these spiritual experiences come to the forefront of our lives. So if we want to teach natural spirituality, we need to start with experience. If I want to teach my son about basketball, am I going to start telling him that a hoop is 10 feet high and that a court is 94 feet long and 50 feet wide? Am I going to do that? Maybe. I hope I don't. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show him a basketball. I'm going to actually shoot hoops with him, right? Maybe we watch a game together. Maybe we play basketball together, one-on-one. I want to offer him the experience of basketball, first and foremost. And, if he likes it, maybe I'll show him some moves, right? I'll show him some dribbling moves. Oh. My wife's going to think I'm crazy. I can speak about the game of basketball, right? But it is nothing without the ball itself and actually shooting a basket. So I can speak about life, but it is never life itself. I can speak about spirituality, but it is never spirit. The Tao that can be uttered and understood is not the Tao. So in teaching a natural spirituality, we guide them into moments of marvel. Moments of marvel in all the different manifestations of life. By encouraging a natural spirituality that is felt in our hearts, we are saying that revelation is not some one-time event, it is continuous. We should not make our children dependent on others' words, but instead dependent on their own experience. So, like it or not, parents are these primary models of spirituality. And according to German philosopher Ludwig Feuerbach, love that name, God, or the spiritual, is just a projection of our desires and wants. And psychologist Sigmund Freud added that God was a projection of our father figure. However, Paul Tillich, the liberal Protestant theologian of the 20th century, his response to Freud and Feuerbach took that metaphor of projection a step further. He said, projection always is a projection onto something. A wall, a screen, never another being, another realm. The realm against which the divine images are projected is not itself a projection. It is the experienced realm of ultimate concern. Okay, that's a lot of words from a theologian. But what he's saying is that Freud and Feuerbach were somewhat right. Our connections with our parents do form our identities with the divine, but that they are projected onto some real realm, some real reality that we experience. And if we are loved unconditionally, we are more likely to think of God as love. If we saw our parents as peaceful people and they instilled peace in us, we might see the ultimate as peace. So in the first decade of life, parents and main caregivers are the children's universe. Now think back to maybe some of the youth here don't have to think back that far. Think back into your lives. Didn't you think that your parents at some point knew everything? I thought my dad knew everything, and I told him that once, and he kind of just gave me this dirty look. Parents and main caregivers are godlike creatures to children, and thus they have the ability to set the table for a feast of spirituality and spiritual experiences. So first and foremost is the simple and profound act of loving a child unconditionally. In so much of our culture, family has turned into a breeding ground for skills and for competition, whose parents are pushing their kids to do more and more and more, yet the Tao tells us to do less and less. Lisa Miller asks parents to instead build a field of love, which helps children bridge into the realm of ultimate concern. Family then becomes sacred in and of itself. And in the first decade of life, we are laying that groundwork for their spiritual lives. When we participate with them in spiritual practices, bring them to church, going into nature and noticing beauty together. We are normalizing the experience of being grasped by some ultimate meaning. Yet it is in loving children in a non-possessive way that turns out to be the best way to instill spirituality. And a religious community like this one becomes part of that field of love. We become part of that sacred family. Fortunately, Those of us who may have had parents who did not quite love us unconditionally, you may be drawn to a loving grandparent, a youth minister, a teacher, a mentor. While other youth who did not experience that parental field of love might skip this whole projection thing and directly relate to the wall or the screen and be ultimately grasped. Life has a way of healing itself. So simply put, as the parents Dao De Ching says, if your children find in you a sincere celebration of who you are, they will return eventually to their own natural joy and natural spirituality in themselves and in you. They learn the art of happiness, contentment, and peace from us. If you want them to be spiritual, then you have to be spiritual yourself. If you want them to be happy, you have to be happy yourself. If you want them to be content, we must be content ourselves. We spiritually nourish our children by keeping ourselves nourished. It's sort of a vicious circle. We nourish them, they nourish us. Our spiritual journeys must continue. And when appropriate, we should tell stories of our own spiritual lives. I have an Uncle Bino. I'm not sure why he's called that. His real name is Robert, but we all call him Uncle Bino. He moved away when I was very young, and he became a wealthy businessman in California. I had not seen him in decades, but when I was about 16, he came back and visited. He pulled me aside, and he told me that he was at an ecumenical retreat in California, led by a rabbi, a Catholic priest, and a Protestant minister. He described it to me as something beyond goose pimples. Beyond goose pimples. He said that if he could do it all over again, he probably would have become a Catholic priest, but he did not pay enough attention to the inner life. I must have been about 16 years old, and weeks later, I received the book in the mail from him, Seeds of Contemplation, by the Catholic monk Thomas Merton. That was an influential part of my own spiritual journey. His story and reading that book made me aware of an intentional type of spiritual life. The things remembered, the treasured moments of sacred time have occurred in the quiet of gentle conversation and honest sharing. Let your gentle presence teach all that is necessary. Love them. Show interest in their spiritual development. Model for them the spiritual life. And blessed be those rocks in our lives who led us into more meaning, who guided us into a deeper realm of being, who showed us the Tao. Blessed be those rocks in our lives who show us the way. May we be those foundational stones to others. May we spiritually nourish the children in our lives, not with facts and principles, but with basketballs of experience. Not with knowing, but with being. Amen, and blessed be.